Yes, here it is. Got my acoustic in hand again. Episode 215 of the Downward Facing Spiritual Spiral podcast. I'm Eddie Cohn, host, creator of the show. Yeah, I've been playing a lot of acoustic guitar lately. And I think it's probably the main reason why I'm not recording as many podcasts lately. I think the podcast is taking a bit of a back seat temporarily, or I'm not sure how long it'll be, but my energy has really been moving a lot towards writing some new music. And I've been playing the acoustic guitar just nonstop the last 6 weeks. I used to play years ago and I stopped and became obsessed with piano and keyboards and drum loops, which I still am, but I think this just goes to show there's really something special about, just changing it up and trying new things and, maybe taking a break from the acoustic guitar, then go back to it a few years later. You just never know what's going to inspire you. So this is a new idea that I've come up with. So anyway, welcome to the show. My name is Eddie Cohn, host, creator of the show, the podcast, and I'm welcoming back Lee Hester to the show for visit number 2. I had him on the show about a month ago, and when we were done talking, we didn't even touch on some other areas that I wanted to talk about. About an hour and 10 minutes went by. And I had to go, and I just immediately asked Lee, hey, I need to have you back on the show. Let's just do part 2. Normally, I've had guests on my show twice before, but a lot of times, I think, a year will go by. But in this case, part 2 is happening about a month or so after part 1. So again, Lee and I dive in and talk about music, social media, but I wanted to get a little bit more of the backstory on Lee and how he got into music and his process as a writer. And I think it's another great talk. You can find Lee on social at Lee Hester, or you can find him also on social at Too Far Moon. That's the name of his band or his side project. All the music on today's episode is from Lee. So really thankful that Lee took the time to speak to me about music and songwriting. And I feel very lucky that he shared his music as well. If you enjoy the episode, please share it with your friends. Maybe write a review on iTunes or Google Play. That's incredibly helpful. Means a lot. You know where to find me on social at Eddie Cohn or the Spiritual Spiral Podcast. And I've got a couple other guests lined up for the show. A couple of them are already recorded, so I just need to get to editing them. I have a new book out, SSAFY Yoga. It's a satire about our culture, and I use yoga as the backdrop. That's available now at ssafyoga.com, or it's also available on Amazon. And I think that's it. I better stop recording this intro because I want to get back to my guitar, and I can see my cats are walking into the studio and wanting to cause a ruckus. So thanks again, Lee, for taking the time to speak to me again for visit number 2. And as always, thanks to you for listening, supporting, and being a part of the Downward Facing Spiritual Spiral podcast.
Gray skies, why you bring us down? And nowhere can the sun be found.
Good to see you.
Likewise. It's been a little noise. I've got a neighbor next door who's sanding their front door, and one of my cats has been going insane. So if I ever am a bit distracted, it's been. That's the interesting thing about recording, whether it's a podcast or a record. I swear to God, on my last record, you can hear my cat meowing in the background in a couple songs.
You probably can. I'm sure.
Yeah, which, it's fine. It's funny. It's just, yeah.
Oh, there you go. Look behind
Oh,
you.
see, there you go. He also, yeah, he gets excited by,
Snuck in.
yeah. That's the if I close the door, he'll start like scratching it and making a bunch of noise. So,
Yeah.
I just watched the Sheryl Crow documentary on Showtime, which is fantastic. And I just read Liz. Were you a Liz Phair fan at all?
Yeah, years ago.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
Well,
I kept up with her. Yeah.
yeah.
She was a rebel. She was awesome.
Totally. And so her book called Horror Stories, which came out a couple of years ago, but I just finished reading it last week, and they're both Cheryl's movie and Liz Phair's book are both fantastic. And I think watching that movie and listening to reading the book and watching the movie, you know what it is? Creativity is this very intimate, quiet, reflective, indescribable space. And I think when you sort of, everything is so, look, I'm generalizing here, but at least to me in my periphery, the world can potentially be very noisy and very
Sure.
very fast paced, and a bit, Leo, get down, buddy. Sorry, my cat just jumped right on the table. The world can be very frenetic and fast paced and blurry, and Cheryl and Liz touch on this. It's sort of the complete opposite of what artistry potentially is. And so I think, very similar to our conversation, I think it's challenging, not impossible, but it's that balancing act of using tech, but also, at least for me, I need reflective, quiet time to create and write from, and touch on that. I mean, where's your creative world? What's stimulating you, and are you aware of, okay, I need to turn off the television for a week, or how do you juggle these two things and then talk about your creativity and that process a bit? A lot there right now. Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it's just, I think I was listening to our podcast, obviously, and, just for editing it, but then also I always like to listen back just to see if everything comes out well. And, it's weird when you criticize or talk about the world, I don't want to ever sound like critical or that whiny old curmudgeon old man, but it is, for me, it's a tough world to navigate, and trying to be creative, but also putting myself out there and let people know I have a new song out. I mean, it's complex.
Sure. Yeah. With trying to answer that currently, like where I'm at right now, I used to have a creative, we'll talk about what I used to have, or kind of how I've always been historically versus kind of where I'm at now, because it's a little different. But for many years, I had a wonderful creative space that a friend of mine helped me build many years ago. It was a good 1,000 square foot facility. Like, I did a lot of records in there for myself and other people, and stacked with tons of gear and all the goodies you could ever dream of. Like, I was really lucky to I invested a lot into that space and into ultimately into my art, because it helped me make better music, I felt, but also gave clients the opportunity to have access to really good gear. So I always had this space that was pretty readily available to me when I wasn't working with clients. And it was heavily soundproof. So I had zero issues with the outside world when it came to finding a quiet place. So that was like a sanctuary for me. Like, I was always able to go in there, and once I was inside, I could be anywhere in the world in my mind, right? Like, I could be, okay, until I step outside, maybe I didn't do that, but I could do that. Like, if I really wanted to, I could. There were no windows. There was nothing. It was all enclosed, no windows. You didn't hear anything, see anything
Yeah.
from the
Well,
outside world.
I mean, not that I'm detracting from what you're saying. You're taking this from in a literal space, but even like figuratively, like were you able to turn off the mental noise
Oh
even
yeah.
when you
So
walked in there and it just
yeah, so it was all parallel.
Yeah.
They all kind of went together. So I guess that's really kind of where I was going with it, is that, I was fortunate to have a space that really helped me to detach myself
right.
from either maybe what was going on in my life, or in my family. Like there was a season. There's a pretty heavy season in my family with a sibling of mine that was going through some medical stuff for a really long time, and I was that was a space that, and I'm not saying that everybody needs to have that kind of space to be able to do this, but for me, it definitely helped for me once I shut that door, that I was embracing my surroundings.
Yeah.
I had to keep my phone on, but I always put it far away from me.
Right.
So if I needed to get on the phone, I had to literally stop what I was doing. And so I think over time, I realized how distracting it is creatively to stop working on something, to go do something mindlessly, or to interrupt that moment, and how hard it is to actually reconnect to it.
Yeah.
When you're in it, it takes a really long time for you to actually reacclimate to the moment that you stopped in a creative process.
Do you think that's been something subconsciously that's been, I mean, you can get as personal as you want, but do you think subconsciously that's been something over the last year or two that has been sort of rearing its head on your creative process?
Well, yes, and also a plethora of other things that happened well before 2020. But yes, that created a lot of noise for me. Now, the interesting thing is I do know people who can create amazing art in the midst of chaos. They're just able to do it. So I don't want to discredit the fact that people can get stuff done in any environment. There are people who can do that. Not all of us can, but there are certainly people who have their back to the wall. They have a very limited amount of time. There's a lot going on. They brought a lot into whatever situation with them, whether it be a studio or it be finishing a painting that you were commissioned to do. They thrive in the noise versus thriving in the silence.
Yeah.
And they thrive in the chaos versus the calm. And I think sometimes you have to, you have to press through the noise. But for me personally, I think I'm best when my head is clear and my heart is clear. Or if also clutter, like I can't do clutter. And sometimes that can really be distracting.
Yeah.
That can be as distracting as scrolling on your phone, where you've got cables everywhere, or you're tripping over stuff, or you're moving things to get to things, instead of creating.
Do you ever, it's weird because I feel like you and I are similar in the sense that I often wait for the muse. And people have told me to be disciplined and, write every day, or just, spend an hour and be in front of Logic, and maybe it's a drum loop this day, or have you ever done that sort of disciplinary action of just, I'm going to do something every day for an hour, or is that hard for you to try?
It's hard.
Yeah.
But I will say, I will share this story with you, because there are people who know, and there are people who don't. But in 2000, I think it was So I opened up a facility publicly in 2007. And the moment that I opened it up, I started I stepped into a studio owner, producer, house engineer, mix engineer, everything, everything guy, right? For all of my clients that I started picking up and started working for. And I stopped writing. And I didn't write for about a year. I didn't write. And it was around the time that I had released, this was my last like Lee Hester record. You know, the licensing cycle, you know, back then there was a cycle. You know, you released a record, it had like an 12 to 18 month shelf life for licensing usually. And then in that time you would write another record. You know, we talked about this last time, but like you would write another record and be prepared to release something, you know, 18 months to 2 years after your previous release. Like that would be kind of the cycle. And I hadn't written anything. And that record was already almost 2 years old. I literally had nothing. I had nothing in the queue. I had no ideas. I had no voice memos. I had nothing. I would play chords and I'd be like, that's terrible. You know, and then I'd try to get on the piano and like, oh, that's terrible. You know, it's like everything was just bad.
Yeah.
I don't know what it was, but I think that a licensing friend of mine, a really good friend who we kind of had parallel careers. He's independent, was doing really well. And we talked and I think I'd mentioned something about not being able to write anything. And he was like, have you ever thought about maybe doing like a song a day? Like just trying to focus on waking up in the morning with an idea, no matter how terrible it is. It may be great, but like it may be terrible. And it's like, no matter what it is, finish it. Yeah. Work 8 hours a day and finish it. Or whatever time you have, you know? And I was like, well, I just finished a record. I don't have anything for like, you know, I had a big gap. I was taking a break anyway because I've worked on so many other projects. So I was like, okay. I was like, maybe I'll try this. And I kid you not, I wrote 30 songs in 30 days.
Yeah.
And now I was never intending to release them. This was an exercise, right? This was intended for me to break through and get into a cycle and get into a rhythm and just finish, because especially as songwriters, like finishing is equally as important as finding a grace. Like you have to finish.
Yeah.
And
well, it's funny because, sorry, I was just thinking like I don't want to say it's easy, but I go through spells where it's easy for me to come up with hooks and melodies. I could do that till the sun goes down almost every day. But you're right. I think we live in this, and I talk about it a lot. Just the idea of finishing something, finishing a song, finishing a short story, a poem, a book. I mean, it's just. I think that's a great exercise too. Now, when you say you finished, were you actually, was it like recorded, or you had just, you know, like the lyrics and the structure of the song?
All of it. Wow. I started with piano or guitar, wrote the lyrics, recorded the demo. So some of it by the end of the day was only like vocal, an acoustic or vocal piano, but I usually had a beat, usually had a bass, usually had some kind of, you know, noises or something in it. So there was some form of what I would call now pre-production, right? There was some form of demo-ish production on it. And so now this kind of connects to what I talked about in losing myself. So in this experience, it ended up being a detriment. So I want to make sure that I'm clear on that I finished these 30 songs in 30 days, and I was going to be done with it, but I started letting friends hear it, and I started letting some music supervisors hear it, and they all were like, "You've got to release this stuff." And the interesting thing about this, Eddie, was that every song was different. Yeah. Because in my mind, I was like, well, I'm gonna write a Foo Fighters song today, or a Foo Fighters style song today, or I'm gonna write maybe a folky, at that time, Civil Wars kind of thing or something, But this was the last set of songs that I released I think you may have heard some of them. I think you had mentioned in an email something, but that was the project that I'm talking about. Those are the 30 songs I wrote in 30 days. And what ended up happening was, though it was really great, when I actually released them, it created a conflict because Lee Hester rocker, Lee Hester folk artist, Lee Hester singer-songwriter, or, you know, it's like all these things. And eventually I had one music supervisor, I'm not going to say his name, but who I love and I trust and I respect tremendously. And he literally was like, dude, I don't know who you are anymore.
As far as my eyes can see, there's not much left to believe. The cold air is killing everything. Why do we give up? Why do we let go? What's left to lose? Go, chase the daylight track down the sunlight.
Wait, but hold on. I want to zero in on this. I'm going to play devil's advocate, and no, because like, first of all, that's one opinion, and second of all, it's sort of like, well, I don't know who you are. I mean, you're an artist. You're exploring different mediums, and you're exploring different sounds, and that's what artists do. And it's sort of like, who the fuck cares what this person said? I mean, it's like, I just think about U2. I mean, look, U2 is one of the greatest bands of all time. You know, REM has changed it up, but it's sort of like, you know, sometimes I get so frustrated when, you know, an artist will just sort of like, not sometimes, I get, it's just, here's that fine line, like Tom Petty, God love him, he's one of my favorites. He's so good at what he was so good at what he did. He didn't have a great vocal range. His songs weren't complicated. So maybe here's a perfect example in support of this music supervisor where, like, I know that's Tom Petty. So I don't know. Like, I'm curious, how much stock did you take in what this person said? Because I don't know. I'm conflicted by that, as you can
Sure.
tell.
No,
Yeah.
that's fair. That's completely fair. So context
Yeah.
is, this guy had licensed my music in the past.
Okay.
And he was a huge fan of what I brought to the table when I was like releasing a record that was like that's a Lee Hester record. Right. So these songs is kind of like the thing that I took from that, and what I think ended up being a really great thing that came out of that was, he wasn't necessarily criticizing what I was doing. He wasn't criticizing the level of musicianship. His perspective, what I believe, was, I think he really wanted me to think about who I was, because he said, now when I'm hearing all of this music that you're giving me, I feel like you're now a music library. I feel like now I am listening to pitches from a library.
Interesting.
Pitches from a company that represents a bunch of artists, and it just so happens that your name's on all of them.
But it's sort of, yeah, but it's also sort of like, in your defense, I mean, it's 30 songs. There was sort of like an intention behind it. Like it's sort of like, well, that's kind of why it's 30 fucking songs. And
that's a lot of damn songs in 30 days to even, now granted, the finished product was not what I did in 30 days, but
the only reason I'm not even giving you a hard time, but this is something that I really think about a lot, is algorithms, expectations, people forgetting that human beings are complicated, and we have, like, I can be angry, but I can also be happy. You know, I can be funny, but also serious. It's sort of like, I'm always curious about that slippery slope of when people want us to sort of be the same. I think that's a complex.
Yeah, I agree. And so I think that what I recognized and what this guy was telling me it was kind of the same thing, just it was at a different time. It was because of something different. Because I did end up releasing that project, it does set me up for review. And it does set me up to be questioned. It does, like I'm putting myself on the, I'm putting myself on the table to be, judged. I walked away from that conversation. I don't remember all of it, but I walked away from that conversation thinking, I don't know who I am anymore. And maybe that was a fundamental reflection of the fact that I chose to wake up and write 30 different songs every day instead of trying to focus on writing 30 songs that were who I am.
I need more than rainbow up in the sky. I need more than a tragedy to start asking why. I need more than a beautiful butterfly. Show me what it's all about. I don't wanna give up now.
If one, quote unquote, forces themselves to act in this disciplinary action, I think one could be productive. Clearly you were. This is something that I think about a lot, but is it truly from the artist's soul and heart if it's being fueled because of a disciplinary action? And maybe it's not,
Sure. Well, clearly I walked away with 30 songs that represented 30 versions of me.
Yeah.
Because not any song, like if you listen to that 30 and 30 project, most of the songs are not even close to each other. Like some of them can translate, but most of them are they were all individual ideas, and they didn't have a connection with each other. And, so walking away from that, that is what birthed Too Far Moon. And Too Far Moon was my intentional effort to write a brand new record that was focused on reconnecting to who I was at that moment in my life. Not who I was before, not who I was when I first found success, but it was like a reinvention. It was a moment for me to press the reset button, and I now can focus on who I want to be. And what is that? Who am I now?
Yeah.
Who am I creatively? Who I am? What do I want to say? What's my content?
I do have those. Sorry, I was thinking about, because to your point, I do have those moments. My artist's name is Eddie Cohn. And I do think about those artists. I used to love Neil Young. I didn't like James Taylor, but there is this sort of aura or preconceived perception if it's just your name, and maybe I'm projecting, and maybe it's just my own projection. But when I used to see singer-songwriter's name, I would think acoustic guitar or piano, sort of like, and to be honest, boring. Like that just bores me. And I think that's why I was really curious about Alanis Morissette, that first record, Jagged Little Pill, singer-songwriter, but Glenn Ballard produced the hell out of that thing. Beck, I love because, full bands sometimes, other times sea change, it's an acoustic guitar. Joseph Arthur, sure it's his name, but he explores these varied. I don't know. So yeah, I'm another area that I get conflicted by. Maybe it's just something I think about too much. But this idea of Lee Hester, Eddie Cohn, does society sort of assume that it's going to be an acoustic guitar piano thing, or have we gotten past that because of the Billie Eilishes? I don't know.
I think now when people see names, most of the things that I listen to on, playlists or, when people send me things, or I mean, I subscribe to Apple Music, and I do have genre playlists that get freshly flushed in every week. Like I get new things every week, so I don't always know what's playing, but it's on a playlist that constantly, I'm listening to. And my point is that I think that when I see people's names now, like I don't think of acoustic or guitar or piano anymore. Okay. I think of beats. I think of,
okay.
If I do think of piano, I think of, okay, well, this is like, I think they're just going to be another pop singer, another pop sound. And that's usually, and to be honest with you, that's kind of what it is, So like, I see more of the artist name being that versus how it used to be band names.
Yeah. My
decision to let go of my name had a lot to do with, I wanted a restart. I wanted to do something that separated me from my past.
Yeah. When I pick up a guitar or something, I'll just start strumming and like mumbling. I'm a mumbler a lot.
Sure.
And then those mumbles turn into lyrics. Talk to me a bit about, it's a bit complicated because I know we've been talking about the muse and feeling inspiration, but if you are actually feeling inspired to pick up the guitar, play the piano, do you have lyrics first, or do you hear like melodies in your head, or how does that, can you explain that a bit?
So I rarely write lyrics first.
Yeah, me too.
And I think that historically, almost every song, for the most part, every song I've ever written, I've always done the music first. I've always done the arrangement first. I've always done that with a mumble. I know a song, God, I can't, it's on a record that is no longer available. Like it's way old. And I literally freestyled the lyrical content while I was because I had the melody down, but I just wanted to get it on tape so I wouldn't forget it. But I also used it to write, to overdub with, because I hadn't actually written the lyrics to the song yet. And almost verbatim, my freestyle became 65 to 70% of the actual finished lyrics.
Yeah. Now
that doesn't always happen, but that's how it happened for that song. But I usually do the same thing. I'm usually mumbling melodies. Or I'm on a piano, I'm doing little single note piano melody things, trying to figure out around the structure of the song. Lyrics and or melody or both at the same time are usually the last thing that I do.
This is what's so frustrating for me is like, I wrote this amazing, I think, melody the last few days, and I'm playing the guitar again, and in my head it sounds so cool, and I hear some big drums and some Coldplay guitars, but sometimes the lyrics don't come, and that's like such the frustrating part for me of songwriting. Whereas this last record, I wrote a lot of lyrics within a few weeks, which was just sort of surreal. That had never happened before. But then I do have those moments where I've sort of like kind of produced a song. I've called the drummer, I've called the bass player. They threw on some things, but you're sort of like playing with fire a bit because I'm hoping the lyrics are going to come, and sometimes they don't. And I'm like, fuck, it's amazing. Like, do you think about, I'm going to go only so far because the lyrics aren't done yet?
Do
you know what I mean?
Now, from a production, yes.
Yeah.
If I don't feel like I have a lyric yet, then I won't commit to full production.
Okay.
How
far would you go?
I'll go to the point where I'm ready to have somebody come in and track something, but I won't go any further.
Okay.
Because sometimes, this happens, but sometimes what I thought was the chorus will be the pre-chorus.
Yeah. And
sometimes what I thought was the verse will end up being the chorus, at least the chords, because it's like, I'll somebody hear it, or I'll just live with it for a little bit and try different melodies, and I'm like, okay, this is making me feel like I want to go here.
Yeah.
But that is not verse energy.
Yeah.
That's chorus energy, right? And so that has happened where I mix it up and I'm like, okay, now that's right to me. That feels right to me. And then then it happens and I'm good.
Yeah.
And that's kind of part of the idea or the experience that I had I think I mentioned it before, that a song will speak to you. It'll get you to the finish line if you let it. So I do think that ultimately, if you pay attention and if you let it, the song will guide you. But you can also put yourself, like what you said, you could find yourself going all out on production and on a track, thinking that you're going to land it, and the next thing you know, the verse is the chorus. So then what? You got to redo it. And you do that once or twice, and you pay for it. You realize that, okay, I need to be open to and adapt and be willing to change and be willing to allow things to evolve.
I feel it waking up inside of me.
There is something about those moments where you don't know what you're doing, but you hear and feel something, and you're not thinking, and that if you can capture that in a quote unquote performance where it might be 5 months later or your 40th or 50th take, that's the genius, but also the conflict and the conundrum, because it's often impossible to replicate that sort of raw organic moment where you're singing that melody or hearing that melody for the first time.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, it creates challenge.
Yeah.
I do think that if you've done it once, you can do it again.
Okay.
Maybe not the same way, but I think if you can connect, if that ever does happen and you can reconnect to the original idea and you feel like the original idea is the right way to go, or something closer to the original idea is the right way to go, then I certainly think that you can reconnect to that, and you're the only one who's going to ever hear the original voice memo. So anybody that listens to it, they're going to get the best version that right. They're you know what I mean? Like for them, it's the version. Perfection is not always what connects people to things.
When did we have these long relationships with music, and I'm sure it's ebbed and flowed over the years, but I guess there's two areas that I'm curious about.
Okay.
When did you get the sense, like when was your curiosity perked by music? Like those first early moments. And then I often think about, when was it a conscious decision, or when were you thinking, oh, I want to try and do this for a living, or so those are like two areas that I've always been curious about when I speak to people.
Okay, so this is probably going to be a little, I wouldn't say embarrassing, but probably almost every kid did this. I mean, we had record players, before we had record players, and then we had cassette tapes, that was my childhood music. That was my, that was my iPhone. Yeah. When I was a kid, that was what you had musically in the radio. And all I know is as early as I can remember, like as literally early as I can remember, I was singing in my church growing up. I was evidently singing a lot. I specifically, so as far as like when I started doing music, I think it was before I even knew that I was doing music. I think I just gravitated and connected before my memories kind of had, before I really remember the first time. And so I just know that that's the way it was, just from family telling me and things like that. So, but the first time that I really started connecting to music, not the first time that I thought it was what I wanted to do for a living, but the first time that I really connected to music, I had to be around 8, 10 years old. And I got my first jam box, boom box, whatever you want to call it, like the thing that you put, and I think I mentioned this in the last podcast we did, but I would record the Casey Kasem Top 40. And I would sing as if I was a part of every band. Like I knew every song. And this is weird because now I can't even remember my lyrics, and I'm looking at them. And I like, I've got, I'm like recording and I'm like, wait, what did I just sing?
Yeah.
But back then it's like all the lyrics, all the melodies. I sang harmonies. I danced. I was in the mirror with my hairbrush, which I don't need anymore. But, I was living the dream, man. I was like, I wanted to be in that band. And then the next song would come on and I'd be like, I want to be in that band. Top 40 had, it was mostly pop, but they did have bands. And then they did have, then you had Michael Jackson. And then I grew up, like I specifically remember when Thriller came out. That was when I really started to feel connected to music. It did something to me. It actually was an outlet for me. Like I was, I'm an empath. And so I think that for many, many years, I carried a lot of things that I, even as a kid, I didn't know what it was. And I had a really, I just was impacted by a lot of things around me that, that I may not have even understood or I didn't have anything to do with. And, so music became a very special part of my life because it helped me to process. Yeah. It helped me to get out my emotions in a way that made me feel safe. As far back as I can remember, that was really when I first started connecting to music, where it started moving me and impacting me. Eddie, it may have been even the same, like kind of age, kind of school, like middle school or elementary school or whatever, that we had this music group come and perform at our school. That particular day, I probably was in trouble. It's probably why I had to sit beside the teacher. But I specifically remember sitting beside my teacher, and I looked at her and I said, "That's what I'm going to do when I grow up." I was in chorus. Like I was a 4-letter athlete all through junior high and high school. But then I did chorus. Like I really wanted to continue to be a part of music somehow. And so I was in a traveling chorus group, and then, we can't really get into a lot of this, but, I went on a journey, where, I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do, but I never let go of music. And then the opportunity came where I was able to join a group that traveled, and it gave me the opportunity to like experience a live performing live. And I think the transition from performing in my bedroom to Casey Kasem, by myself, to doing chorus in high school, and then actually traveling to places I'd never been before in my life and being in front of people I didn't know every night or however many nights a week, and learning the live experience, I was like, this is amazing. It's like, there is no doubt that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so when I finished that tour, I came back home. I worked for my dad unloading trucks. He was a distribution manager for a huge like fabric company. And so I was this, kid, kid out of college. I quit after 2 years. I didn't get my degree because I wanted to because I wanted to go tour.
Yeah.
I came back, worked in a hot warehouse unloading trucks for a year, I think almost a year, saved up money, went and did my first record down in Florida with a guy that I had met while I was on that one tour, made that record. And then I moved to Nashville when I was 23. I was able to get into, I didn't have a job yet. I moved without, like, I don't even know what I was doing. I would not do that now. That's the weird thing is that I don't think that I could do that now, but back then I didn't know any better. And I was like a free spirit. I mean, I'm still a free spirit, but it figured itself out, but yeah, that was kind of my beginning. That was my moment of connection and the realization that this was what I wanted to do. And then kind of a little bit of a timeline of me actually making the step.
Lee, it's been nice to get to know you and talk to you these last few weeks, and I appreciate it. I think you need to keep creating and keep making music, and I think you know that. But I think that last song, hopefully that you wrote, hopefully you'll finish it, quote unquote, finish it. And yeah, it's been nice to talk to you, and I love my show because it's just nice to reflect and talk about these very inspiring and interesting, but also very complicated areas. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know that we've talked about a lot of things, and it's kind of obviously been a two-part situation, but I had a lot of conversation today before this podcast with a friend of mine that I didn't mention anything about that on today, but maybe we can do off record.
Yeah,
have a conversation off record sometime. It was really, really insightful. We just didn't. It's just not the way we went today. So, which is totally fine. Like I think sometimes it's just about. It's not always about. It's not always about a point. Sometimes it's just about the journey.
Yeah,
and it's about learning, and experiencing perspectives and being inspired. This is technology,
yeah.
So it's like, I don't know, it's like as long as, sometimes it's just about how can we inspire and be inspired in the noise and in the quiet.
Yeah.
In all of it. Because we all have to be somehow inspired where we are with what we have and with who we are.
Well, cool, man. I appreciate you talking, and I'll set this up in the next couple of weeks. But it's been nice to reflect on all these areas. I appreciate you taking the time.
Sure thing, man. It's been great.
Yeah, man.
It's been challenging to think about these things.
I know.
It's good stuff. So
cool. Well, yeah, we'll talk again, not on the podcast, but I'll send you an email in the next week or so.
Yeah, sure thing, man.
Cool, dude. Have a great night.
You too, man. Take care.
Bye.